My name is Jiles Smith, and welcome to Our Community. Much again, sir, for being a part of our show.
Sure.
Kind of jump right into it. We have some very important subjects to our community, and we want to see if we can touch bases back with you again and see if we can get our hands around it.
Okay.
First, human trafficking, as always. That seemed
Yes.
to be a big point.
Yeah.
What's the status or update about that?
Well, you know, it's been a priority for the last over 3 years, as you know, the last time we talked, and we're moving forward. We're not going to stop until we really get a better handle on it. And I think since our last discussion, we implemented, or perhaps then I told you about it, we implemented our human trafficking prosecution unit, vertical prosecution, with one of our top trial lawyers, and Melissa Rodriguez, who has done an outstanding job. And she's putting together numerous cases, working with our police agencies, and numerous felony cases. And what we're finding out now is we're seeing more and more gangs involved in human trafficking as their criminal economy, for lack of a better term, as gangs used to. Their major focus used to be dealing drugs,
Right.
guns, but mostly drugs. But as my good friend Kamala Harris, the Attorney General, says, you know, once you sell the drugs, they're gone, and so your product is gone. So they are finding that if they can traffic a young girl, they can use that girl, and they'll call whatever they call her a product or whatever, over and over, daily, being abused sexually for a profit for the gangs. And it's something we're seeing more of now. And I don't know if it's something that's new, or perhaps because we created this human trafficking protocol that our eyes are opened up, and now we're training law enforcement officers. We've trained over thousands of law enforcement officers just in San Bernardino County alone on what to look for when you're investigating certain cases, and even gang cases now. If you see young girls involved, you need to stop and talk to them, find out what's occurring, why they're there. So that's a big step. The other thing that happened, and I know it's happened since I talked to you, is one of the last phases was to put together a San Bernardino County task force on human trafficking, driven by law enforcement. And our new sheriff, John McMahon, took that issue, went to his staff, and they now administer our San Bernardino County Human Trafficking Task Force, which includes the Sheriff's Department, of course, our department, our investigator, and we're talking to other police departments to put investigators and detectives into that task force. And I can't really share with you some of the cases that are occurring, investigations. It's confidential, but they're doing a great job. And when some of those cases come together, I think the public's eyes will open up. And you will see what I've been talking about gang involvement, human trafficking, and then your normal, for lack of a better term, normal prostitution, pimps, and those people that continue to abuse young girls, abuse young women, and traffic them, which I've called modern slavery since we started this process.
In fact, it is modern slavery in my opinion as well.
I totally agree. You know, we have a great president that I look up to in the past, President Lincoln, who you read the history books and you know what he did regarding slavery, but now you have the slavery behind the curtain, slavery behind the closed door, the modern slavery of trafficking young girls, young women, some starting at the age of 9 and 10 years old. It's horrible, and I think for a modern society, the United States of America, we need to put an end to it. And that's a commitment I made in San Bernardino County as the district attorney. And my friend Nancy O'Malley in Alameda County in the northern part of the state. And now I'm going to push this out nationally to get their attention at the National District Attorneys Association level.
So when you bring it up, you're gonna to kind of show what we've been doing here?
Yeah, I am very fortunate. The staff that I have here, you saw the documentary put together by my worker, Chris Lee, the CAO, and it's something I want to spread nationally. We're looking to show it up in Sacramento in Northern California here soon. And I have the honor of sitting as chair of the National Corrections and Reentry Committee for the National District Attorneys Association. And I'm going to start having these conversations at the national level. There are thousands of elected prosecutors and over 44,000 deputy district attorneys or assistant district attorneys, depending on the state and county what they're called. And it's I think what we did here as a model could be used not only across the state but across the country, because if you recall, our model is you have the suppression side of it, and we're doing a great job with that. Prop 35, the initiative that passed by a record over 80%, helped us with the suppression side. We just prosecuted People versus Knox. Melissa prosecuted, my lawyer, this individual that was trafficking, and he's looking at 15 to life at his sentencing date that's coming up. That proposition helped. So on the suppression side, we're doing a good job. We just had another one, pled guilty to 5 years of state prison. Just pled guilty because we had the evidence. They're doing great work. And then the way we treat victims, that's the other part of the model that people need to pay attention to. We really need to pay attention. How are we going to get these young girls, and some of them underage, out of this vicious cycle and get them back into our communities and society? And so we're working with our faith-based community, an organization we developed called CASE, Coalition Against Sexual Exploitation. They're doing a fabulous job with all our partners in different departments in the county. And then the demand side of it, it's a supply and demand issue. And we rolled out our Stop the John program, and that's getting thousands of hits. Every time we prosecute somebody for solicitation of prostitution, once they're convicted, not arrested, we want to protect the innocent. As I told you before, we put their photo on our website, we put their name and their DOB. It'll stay on there for a year. And part of it is to hold them responsible. That's part of the punishment. But the other part, bigger part for us, is deterrence.
Exactly.
If you're going to do this type of crime, be prepared. Be prepared that your face is going to be out there for the world to see. And it's working. People say, well, how do you know it's working? Well, we've got about 60 of those cases pending, and they don't want to plead guilty.
Right.
They're stuck. They're concerned. So I guarantee you, everybody they talk to, the word is spreading.
Right.
So if we could get that across the state of California, can you imagine? How about across the country?
Right.
You do something like that, you're going to be everywhere.
Right.
People are going to know. Community members are going to know. Family are going to know. So that's another part of it. Then you add to what I just said. Our special task force, my gang units now, they're keeping their eyes open. But this San Bernardino County Task Force on Human Trafficking, it's going to be a big wave of cases that is coming. Like I said, I can't talk about it right now, but there's some serious trafficking issues out there right now that we are now looking at. And honestly, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we weren't doing a good job at it. Investigators, police agencies, with all due respect to them, including the Sheriff's Department, they weren't really looking, but now we see it. So we're going to really keep a close eye on that. And then eventually, in talking to businesses and other parts of our community, we really need to look at the labor side of it too, labor trafficking.
Right.
And these people that are being brought in as slaves, really, for the amount they're getting paid, for the type of housing they're putting them in. People, a lot of those folks coming from, our country south of us, Mexico, it's an epidemic.
Well, they get threatened as well. They come over here
Absolutely.
and say, if you say anything, we're going to get you
We're
deported.
going to deport you back.
Right.
So it's a huge task, but a task we've wrapped our arms around, and I think we have a model that could be implemented anywhere in the country.
So let's stick with the human trafficking for just a few more seconds. Some of these young girls and young boys are being They're basically runaways, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Or some are just being caught up in the life. This guy's my boyfriend. The next thing they know, they slowly but surely get into a whole different atmosphere. This seems to be, we're talking kind of off camera, how the game has changed, and I'm not saying this is a game, but the old pimp versus the new pimp, if you will.
Sure.
We're used to for the caricatures of having the feather in your hat, the fur coat, and et cetera.
Right.
And it seemed to be a victimless crime.
Right.
The girls want to be here, I'm protecting them. Well, no, it's not.
Right.
The unintended consequences of these actions are someone's sons or daughters are being hurt,
Absolutely.
taken advantage of maliciously
Yeah.
and viciously in some situations.
Yeah, and we're seeing that. And you're right. You know, they're still out there. The pimps that have this whole culture, and they have their cellists with their initials on it, and their big, you know, fedora hats or whatever. You can see that on our documentary. They are what I'll call, and let's use in gang terms, the old school.
Yeah.
But they're training the young ones. They're training. Here's how you do. Here's how you use these girls. Here's how you manipulate their minds. And that's a quote in there, and that's what they do. And which leads me to the other part of your question, and is the manipulation of those that are vulnerable. Right. And one of the things that we train law enforcement to do is look at the runaways. Make sure that you find out where they're at, where they're staying, where they came from, etc. But it's not just runaways anymore. Right. I mean, they're going into various sites, whether it's school sites, whether it's campuses, any place where there's that vulnerable victim. And I'm glad you mentioned boys, because it happens to young men as well. Yeah. Not the percentage we see with the girls, but it's still there. They're victims. Mm-hmm. So anytime you see that vulnerability, they'll go after it. And, there was a fallacy in I mentioned Kamala Harris, and she brought this out in her protocol that she put together from the Attorney General's office, that, well, most of these girls were from other countries. No, 70% of them here in our state are from the state of California. Right. So they are out recruiting, they're out manipulating, and it starts with maybe a broken home. They don't have somebody that cares about them. This so-called pimp comes in. I'll take care of you. Why don't you be my girlfriend? Let me buy you a new purse. Let me buy you some clothes. Next thing you know, he's abusing her physically, sexually, and then he turns and puts her on the street, and they feel trapped. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to turn. And they manipulated them to that point where then they are being abused and used. And that's the hard part of us trying to help these young women and young girls, is they're so used to that lifestyle, that dynamic of support. So we're trying to create support other than that.
Right.
And I think it's working. Before, a few years ago, these girls get released from juvenile hall if they're underage. The person picking them up was the trafficker, was the pimp. Right. So that we knew immediately, we need another place for these young ladies. So we're doing it. We're doing it with Rachel's House. We're looking at expanding that. We're looking at, again, the faith-based community has been a big partner. They're really looking at getting a place, a home for these girls in San Bernardino County.
Here in my nonprofit, we try to address the problem before anything happens. That whole piece of a young lady, or young man, but mostly a young lady, feeling that nobody cares, nobody's here to protect me. Yeah. And you're right. They if you think that you can hide behind your gated community and they won't come and get your child, they will.
Oh, they will.
They go to the schools and recruit them.
Well, they do.
Well, they do it online now.
That's
they
right.
can recruit online. You've got, they're using, look at all our kids that are on Facebook, and they're on their iPhones or cell phones, and they're talking, and they've got pictures now out there. I mean, you can go on Backpage and order up, a young girl, and so social media is a big part of it too, that we really need to take a better look at on what's going on, not only on what's happening on the as far as the traffickers go, but on the recruitment side of it, for lack of a better term, where they're going out, recruiting these girls or getting these girls involved. So there's a lot of different dynamics. Again, I think the way to attack this is a cooperative approach, and we've, I think, done a pretty good job of that here in San Bernardino County.
Okay, let's talk about something else. Crimes against police officers. Can we elaborate on that program?
Yeah, Crimes Against Peace Officers. We put together this new unit back in May of this year, and it started, at the funeral services for Deputy McKay. It was killed in the line of duty, and I looked at my staff and said, law enforcement officers, peace officers, our sheriff deputies, they're partners with us in fighting crime and getting justice done for victims, and I think we should do a better job of protecting them, because they are victims too. Just because they put a badge on and have a gun and a bulletproof vest doesn't mean they aren't victims. And I don't mean just a victim like the worst, Deputy McKay, who lost his life, or Deputy Collins, who was shot several times, but others that are being assaulted on the streets, assaulted in the jails. So after I had that thought, I put my staff on it. My assistant Gary Roth, I talked to Sheriff McMahon, and he said, with the advent of AB 109 and realignment, he's seen a 50% increase in assaults of his deputies in the jails.
Wow.
So I thought, wow, exactly. We need to do a better job. So the first step was to do our research. How many of these cases are there? I mean, if they're only 10 a year, okay, or 20 or 25, well, we can handle it with general prosecution. I actually was surprised when my assistant said in 2012, we went back to those stats, there were over 2,100 cases, crimes against a peace officer. Wow. 600 of those were felonies, and I thought, you gotta be kidding me. Now, it's not that we were ignoring them, but we weren't handling them properly. I'll give you an example. If there was several felonies, let's say one of those 600 felonies was evading a peace officer, or a PC-69 threatening him and his family, and I know where you live, or I'm going to kill you. A lot of the times, because they were peace officers, we would just dump that count and have the guy plead out to a burglary or an whatever the case may be, without taking into consideration that officer's a victim too. We need to talk to that officer. So that was one of the first things we started to look at. And then, so in a span of 3 years, we looked back, there was over 6,000 cases. So I said, wow. So we started going around the state, around the country. And one of the models we found, one of the best models, was Dade County in Miami, Florida. And my assistant talked to them, and they said, this is one of the best units we have. You really want to form a cooperative partner approach, let the peace officers on the streets know you care about them. Right. And so what we did, we looked at that model, and we're not the first county to have this in the state of California, but I think we have one of the better models in the state of California now that we put our resources. We put together a vertical prosecution unit, meaning from the time the crime hits on the street, it's assigned to a specific lawyer, and it stays with that lawyer. Doesn't transfer to another lawyer after filing or prelim or trial or post-trial. No. I put my top senior supervising felony DAs. I put my supervising DA over the whole protocol, Rick Young, and then I put actually misdemeanors, even for the 148s, those people that were obstructing an officer from doing their job. Right. I said, we need to hold those people accountable too. I mean, if somebody's keep you from doing your job, you would want us to do something about that. If they took you or your camera and said, hey, get that camera out of here, or threw it on the ground, or got in your way, that's a crime. The same things happen to officers. And I said, we got to stop pleading these out to infractions and disturbing the peace. And so we put the protocol together, and then part of that too was treating them like victims. Just because, as I indicated before, you put a badge on and wear a gun doesn't mean you should be spit on, pushed, assaulted, physically harmed. And if that happens, then they're going to get a letter just like any of our victims. Right. You're a victim and you have these rights, A, B, C, D, and E. Here's what we can do for you. Let's say you were threatened and you were worried about maybe not yourself but your family. We can give you the resources to move. I mean, little things like that we weren't doing before. And communication. You know what, officer? I'm filing this felony. They want to plead guilty to this. What are your thoughts? We weren't doing that.
Right.
So
there's no closure. There was
no closure for that officer. It was kind of like, And so people say, well, how do you know? Is it working? Yeah, I've gone around, I've talked to the associations, including the Sheriff's Association, and the last board meeting I was at, one of the deputies raised his hand and said, hey, I was a victim, and your deputy DA called me, and they're filing a felony. And you know what? It felt good that somebody called me, that they cared enough that somebody assaulted me. And this deputy happened to have been physically assaulted.
Right.
But it goes a long way.
Right.
And, I mean, think about it. Shouldn't we be doing that? Those are the same officers and deputies that are protecting you and I and our kids and our family.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody should be watching over them.
Right.
So I took it upon the district attorney's office. That's going to be our role. That's what we're going to do. And again, I think it's you use the term justice for a lot of different scenarios. I mean, think about our justice system. It starts on the streets with our peace officers who are putting their lives on the line. So I said, we're going to do something to make sure that when they are victims, justice will be sought for them. And it's working. They had their first countywide meeting, my CAPOS unit, Crimes Against Peace Officers, with our coordinator, and it was a fantastic meeting. I went to the first of it, and I had a young deputy DA trying misdemeanor cases, people that are obstructing police officers, PC 148, and he's come up with different ways to pick juries, and he's excited, and so the feeling as far as our law and justice community, it's working.
Now, when we talk about that, let's be more specific, because that was very interesting. I'm thinking about some cop episodes I've seen.
No, come on. Yeah.
So the son is being arrested by the officers.
Yes.
And the mother jumps out there and acts a fool and grab him and all that kind of stuff. That's the guy you're talking about.
That's the guy. That would be probably a misdemeanor 148. Interfering with a peace officer's duties. In those situations, what would happen is, depending on the crime, the son may or may not get prosecuted.
Right.
And every now and then, because of that, we would either dismiss the case or just cite him for an infraction.
Right.
But when you're on the street and you're trying to do your job and you've got somebody in custody, I don't care who you are. You could be the strongest police officer in the world, Superman. When you got somebody on your back and grabbing at you, it's scary. Yeah. You've got your gun here, you're exposed. Yeah. So they need to know that in those situations, we're not going to dump those cases anymore. Right. Those people are going to be held responsible.
There was a double-edged sword. Unintended consequences. If you don't punish the person for doing that, they think it's okay to do it again.
Absolutely.
And the second piece is the peace officers, like you said, is out there thinking, do I fight this person off? Right. Oh, now it's a woman, not a man. There can be some perception. Right. Well, again, you don't have to reach for your gun or not.
You have no idea.
You should be trained to step back, let the officer do what they got to do.
Absolutely.
100% right with that. Yeah. That you should be commended for having that unit. That's very powerful. I mean, the people need that. And there's a thought process in the community. It just gives my little diatribe here.
No,
there's a thought process that why would, if a person shoots an officer, why would they get a heightened level of scrutiny or prosecution because it's an officer? But people don't understand. It's a flag of justice, if you will. Absolutely. It's what we stand for. Yes. So if you hurt an officer, what you're really saying is you're destroying the system.
You're destroying the system. You're destroying authority. You are attacking the same people that when something happens to you, you call them. I mean, what happens if somebody shoots in your home or somebody hurts one of your family members? The first thing you do is you call 911 and you call that peace officer. You call the person, the boots on the ground that protect us. Right. And then to turn around and say, well, why are we focused on them as victims and what's the DA doing? Well, the DA doing, I think, is what society should do. Yes. And that is protect those people that are protecting us.
Question. Yeah. Imagine calling folks from help at your house and nobody's coming.
Exactly.
They're afraid to come in your neighborhood.
Right.
You do not want to have a system like that. You want to be able to say, I can go anywhere, I can protect anyone.
Every peace officer I know in this county, they'll go into that neighborhood. Right. They'll go up the mountain when Dorner's in a cabin shooting bullets that are flying out head first to make sure that they get him before he kills somebody else.
Right. Again, you should be commended for that.
Thank you.
You talked before about a new prison that you recommended.
Yeah, it's controversial. And I should backpedal a little and say, I'm fortunate in this county because Sheriff McMahon's following through, Sheriff Hoops was in the middle of it, but Sheriff Penrod, when I first came in, he was sheriff. he had the foresight to build another prison out in, jail, really, out in Adelanto. But now it's turning into a local kind of prison because we're going to have the bed space. Because what is happening with AB 109 and realignment, all these people that are ending up in local jail that used to go to prison, the non-felons, non-serious felonies, the non-sexual cases, they're creating problems. And I already talked about the percentage of assaults on deputies.
Assaults on each other as well.
That's tremendous increase in that. There's just a study from Stanford University came out and said, here are the problems we're seeing. A lot of it is the in custody issues. But speaking of in custody, we don't have the room to keep them in. So these criminals know, hey, if I get 16 months local prison time, I'm out in 2. I'm back out, and I can commit another burglary or steal another car. And we're watching our property crimes are going up. Now, thank God, knock on wood, our serious and violent felonies aren't yet, but we're watching that real close too. But those people that used to go to state prison, our property crimes are going up. Now, I will say this, and I've made a commitment to our citizens. If you commit a crime that you're eligible to state prison for, or you have prior strikes, we're sending you to state prison. Governor Brown isn't happy with that. In fact, he called me about 2 months ago. Mike, I need you to talk to my new Secretary of Corrections because San Bernardino County is sending too many people to state prison. And I told Jerry, I said, that is because I was elected to protect the citizens of my county. And if you commit a crime that's state prison eligible, that's where you're going. We don't have any room at the local inn, Governor. So I did talk to the Secretary of Corrections, and I said I'm following the law, and until people change it, that's what I'm going to do.
I don't get that very often in politicians. I'm going to call you a politician if you don't mind.
No, that's okay.
I mean it in a flattering way.
No.
People who say what they mean what they say, and follow through with their actions, and do what's best for us, not what's politically correct or what makes everybody feel good. Sometimes you got to be the man standing on the wall.
I do. I have to say, my priority is this. If I make every decision, toughest decisions, on what's best for our citizens and our victims, then I will never fail. I mean, think about it. I may make a mistake now and then, or I may have to adjust a decision. But if we make the decision on what's right for victims or our citizens, that's what we should do. Not what the newspaper may say, not what other political opponents might say, people that second guess the district attorney. No. We make decisions on what is right, what is ethically right, and we protect the integrity of the district attorney's office, because this office is bigger than any individual, bigger than me. It's the integrity of the office, because the decisions we make affect people's lives.